Alright, so we have finally made it to the most important tool, in my opinion, in MidiPipe, which is the AppleScript trigger tool. And so before we even go into that, we need to have a look at some basics of Apple scripting and how we can apply them to our DAWs specifically. So before we even get into that, let me show you the kind of things we're going to be doing today. So let me open up GarageBand. I'm going to create a new project. Right? So GarageBand, like any other DAW, has some shortcuts. For instance, if I press my S key, I solo the track. If I press M, I mute it. I could also press Command-Shift-Period to move the, what's this called? The cycle range? Yes, the cycle range to the right. Command-Shift-Comma to move it to the left. Of course, the spacebar is gonna start and stop playback. The R key is gonna, as you can see, start recording. We also have the square brackets to move forward and backward in our preset list. So there are a bunch of very useful shortcuts. So what we can do with AppleScript is we can trigger those shortcuts, and then what MidiPipe allows us to do is we can use our MIDI controller, our physical MIDI controller, pressing buttons, moving sliders and faders to trigger those AppleScript actions, i.e. those emulated keystrokes to in turn perform actions in GarageBand or any other DAW. So that's kind of the signal flow there. So let's start with AppleScript first. Let me open the script editor. We're going to create a new document, and this is what it looks like. So, of course, this is not a lesson on how to use AppleScript. There are tons of things you can do with it, which I'm not even familiar with. I'm going to limit this to some basics and things that are useful for our purposes specifically. So first of all, keystrokes. We want to emulate pressing keys, and we can do that via the so-called system events. So our first line of code is going to be tell application system events. And since we have a list of actions we want to perform, we're going to put them inside here, and then we're going to add end tell. So if we only wanted to perform one action, we could have our entire code on just one line, and then we would not need this end tell addition here. But since we have multiple actions, we need to add end tell. That's how AppleScript works. So the first one of such actions is the following one. Tell application GarageBand, or if you're using a different DAW, you will put in the name of that DAW to activate, right? And in this case, as you can see, I was able to have a single line. We just need to tell it to activate, no other actions. So I don't need an extra end tell for this command. And the reason why we want GarageBand to activate is we are emulating keystrokes, right? So if we want AppleScript to press, let's say, the square bracket, now if GarageBand is active, it's going to trigger the switch to next preset action. But if the script editor window is still active and focused, adding a square bracket is just gonna look like this, right? It's not gonna trigger anything in GarageBand. So first of all, we need GarageBand to be focused. Okay, and then we need to actually perform the keystroke. So every single key on your keyboard has a certain key code associated to it. And luckily enough, pretty easy to find out what these key codes are. Perfect, look at that. So in our case, let's say we want to use this square bracket. This is going to be key code 30. And so it's going to be as easy as inputting this line of code, key code 30, right? So whenever we want to check that our script does not have any mistakes, we can use the hammer tool. As you can see, we did not get any pop-up window. It's being formatted, and so we know this code is correct. It's going to work. Just to give you an example, if I added, if I added end tell here, which is not needed because our whole tell command is in just one line, we would get a syntax error message, right? So this code is sound, and we can test it by pressing the play button. So what's going to happen now as I press the little play button here, it's going to bring GarageBand to the front, and then it's going to perform the keystroke, which is one of GarageBand's shortcuts, right? To switch to the next preset. See, it moved from the classic electric piano preset to the classic suitcase, MK4. Let's switch back to the electric piano. So I'm going to check which key code we need for that. So we need this bracket, that would be key code 33. So let's edit our script, check that everything is okay, run it. And as you can see, GarageBand came to the front and it switched back to the classic electric piano. So you see how this is working. Now, every DAW is going to have its own set of shortcuts. So for GarageBand, you can look for the user guide. So there we go. That's the official Apple page. Here's the user guide for Mac, table of contents, and then towards the bottom we have the GarageBand settings and keyboard shortcuts section. There we go, main window shortcuts. Check this out. Create a new project, Command N. We can do this in AppleScript. Create a new track, show hide the master track, rename the track, start playback, stop playback, start recording. All of these actions have their own shortcut, which means we can use them in AppleScript. And that's just the main window, right? We also have the editor shortcuts and the global tracks shortcuts, right? So every single one of these actions can be performed through AppleScript. Now you might have noticed that some of these actions imply multiple keys being pressed at the same time. So one of the most useful multi-key press sort of actions that I found is, you know, Command Shift period to move the cycle range to the right, or Command Shift comma to move it back. So how do we do that in AppleScript? Let me show you that real quick. So first of all, let's find out what the correct key codes are. So 47 for period and 43 for comma. So let's do 47. At the same time, we want Command and Shift to be pressed as well. So we need to add using Command down and Shift down. And let's check that the syntax is correct. There we go. So if I run this, as you can see, the range was moved to the right again. And then if we use 43, we can move it back like that. One more time, and it's back at the start. So with this syntax, you get access to every single shortcut, which means every single action that you can perform with shortcuts, which is pretty powerful. But of course, we don't want to open a script editor window and use our mouse to click on the play button, right? We want to just press a button on our MIDI controller and trigger that action. And that's where MidiPipe comes in. So let me move this out of the way here. Let's make some room for MidiPipe. There we go. So if you have a physical MIDI controller, you would use the MIDI in tool first and select your controller from the drop-down menu. In my case, I don't have one on me right now, so I'm going to use the control slider, which kind of emulates a slider, right? The channel number is 1, CC is 0. So whenever I move this, it's kind of equivalent to turning a knob on an actual physical controller. Then we want to use the A-list tool, and there's a video specifically on this one in the playlist of MidiPipe tutorials that I did, which you can find here. So let me just show you quickly how that works. As I move my slider, this sends out some MIDI information, and the A-list is gonna display that for us. So we know that the control change we're changing here is number 0 on the first channel, and these 3 numbers, these are so important. because these are the ones we're going to use in the AppleScript trigger tool to make sure that that specific MIDI message is associated to whatever action we want it to be associated to. So without further ado, let's drag in our AppleScript trigger tool. And you could edit your AppleScript here, but as you can see, the formatting is kind of inconvenient for edits. Plus, we don't have any way to check where we might have made any mistakes in the script. So what I would suggest is to just cut this and paste it into the script editor, right? Then we can compile the script, and as you can see, this is much easier on the eye. It's also easier to edit. So let's check out the differences between an AppleScript trigger tool ready script and what we had before. So the first difference is this first part here, the onRunMe message part. And that's the key part. This means that instead of just having to click on this triangle, we can use a MIDI message to trigger the action that we define. Now here it says tell application finder. We want to use keyboard shortcuts, right? So we need to use system events, right? And then here we have two actions. We just need one for this example. So let's just remove the second action. And this is the heart of the AppleScript trigger tool. So here we have an if statement, and then we have these three items of our MIDI message, item 1, item 2, and item 3, which are exactly these numbers we have right here. So the first number identifies the type of message and its channel. So I know that 176 means that the channel is channel number 1, and it shows that here as well, and that the type of message is a MIDI CC message, right? Our slider is sending CC messages. Okay, so the second number here, which would be item number 2, that's the number of our message. So in our case, we have CC0, right? So that's shown there. If we use a different controller, let's say we want to use CC1, which is the modulation wheel, move this. As you can see in the alias tool, now we have CC number 1. And then item 3 of the message, that's the last number here, it's just the value. So the position of our slider, so to speak. So let's edit our script here. So I know that my slider is sending a message and the first item of that message is 176. So let's type that in here, 176. The second item is 1. So let's set this to 1. And then with the third item, we have a little more flexibility. So we could use the equal symbol. That means that, whenever we move our slider, only when the position of it is 0 will the action be triggered. Not very convenient, right? That's why the default setting here is larger than. So every position of our slider that is larger than 0 will trigger the message. But why exclude 0, right? I want, for this example, for it to be the case that whatever the position of the slider, whenever I move it, no matter the value of it, the action gets triggered. And to do that, I can simply remove this part of the script, right? All I care about is the first two items, and then whatever the value of our slider, we want the action to happen. Now, as you can see here, the default setting was say MidiPipe. So they managed to use just one action, which is say MidiPipe, so we didn't need to add an end if section. But in our case, we have two actions, right? If you remember from the previous script, we need to bring GarageBand to the front, and then we need to use a key code. So I'm going to remove this part, and I'm going to add end if, because we have two actions here. So the first action, of course, is tell application GarageBand to activate. And the second action is, let's make it key code. Let's make it an easy one. I think 1, that's S, right? Yes, so we're gonna solo our track in this case. Now let's check that everything is formatted properly. Seems to be the case. So what we can do now is we can copy this into the AppleScript trigger tool on our pipe. And You might have noticed it says here, not compiled. That's not because there are any mistakes, it's just because we need to save this pipe first, reopen it, and then the code will be compiled. So let's do Command S, save as my pipe, why not, on the desktop, okay, and then Command O to open it. And as you can see, our code is now compiled. So that means that whenever I move my slider, no matter the value it has, these two actions will be triggered. So let's check it out. Move this. How about that? We have soloed our track. And if I move it again, it's unsoloed. So as you can see, so long as there is a shortcut for a certain action, you can perform that action using your MIDI controller, your physical MIDI controller. I actually have a video, I'm gonna link to it here, basically where I show you how to do this. So I have a new guitar kind of project, right? And every guitar project should probably have a pedal board. And I created an Apple script to use my MIDI pedal board to activate and deactivate the pedals in this pedal board. Pretty cool stuff, check it out. Other than that, the possibilities are endless. So yeah, I would strongly encourage you to check out the manual of your DAW, see what shortcuts you have access to, and then you can use the script we just created to use MIDI information, use your buttons and sliders and knobs on your physical controller to trigger those shortcuts, i.e. those actions. Pretty cool stuff. I hope you found this useful. If so, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, maybe even become a member, right? Why not if you have some cash to spare? And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video next week. Take care.